And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Welcome to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast.
Flibbity-jibbity nonsense.
I thought it was terrific.
Not just big, it's huge.
Let's go!
Welcome, and thanks for listening to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast. My name is Jeff Morey, and I am your host. Before we jump into this week's topic, chemtrails and weather modification, let's do our weekly roundup of the big news stories of the week. Nearly 9.9 million pounds of ready-to-eat meat from producer Bruce Pack has been recalled this week due to concerns about the possibility of Listeria contamination. Restaurants, institutions, and other establishments are urged not to serve or use these products. These products should be thrown away and returned to the place of purchase, the FSIS, the United States Food Safety and Inspection Service, said in a statement this week. A federal judge this week set May 5th of 2025 as the date for the beginning of the trial of Sean P. Diddy Combs. Federal prosecutor Emily Johnson said the government could take 3 weeks to present its case against Combs, who pleaded not guilty last month to charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs is looking at facing life in prison if convicted. It was announced this week that TD Bank, the 7th largest bank in the U.S. by deposits and 10th largest bank by total assets, was hit with a record $3 billion fine over drug cartel money laundering. The fine includes a $1.3 billion penalty that will be paid to the U.S. Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Reportedly, TD also intends to pay $1.8 billion to the Justice Department and plead guilty to resolve the investigation regarding them violating the Bank Secrecy Act. The U.S. Department of Justice said in a statement that TD Bank had long-term, pervasive, and systemic deficiencies in its procedures of monitoring transactions. On Thursday evening, Israeli airstrikes hit central Beirut, killing at least 22 people and wounding dozens more. In another separate airstrike attack, Israeli forces hit a school sheltering thousands of displaced Palestinians in northern Gaza, killing at least 11 and wounding 22, including women and children. These attacks continue as the war between Israel and Hamas rages on for over a year now. With no end in sight, I'm sure these will be frequent reports in our weekly news roundup, unfortunately. And our final news story of the week, which leads up perfectly to this week's topic, on Wednesday evening, Hurricane Milton made landfall near Sarasota, Florida, as a strong Category 3 hurricane. It had wind speeds reported at 120 miles per hour upon landfall, which diminished to Category 1 as it moved inland. At one point, Milton left over 3 million people without power in Florida. Storm surge and a tornado outbreak have caused a significant amount of damage to the central parts of Florida, and as of the airing of this show, there were 14 confirmed deaths attributed to the storm. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone affected by Hurricane Milton. Okay, so that's what's going on this week in the news. Let's get right into this week's show topic, chemtrails and weather modification. Do you believe that the government, and in this episode I mean any government, foreign or domestic, has the power and the technology to alter and even control the weather? If you think this is just another crazy conspiracy theory, think again. In this episode, we will discuss just what we know about what world governments are able to do to change and alter the weather. Before we discuss HAARP and other mechanisms of weather modification, let's talk about chemtrails. So let me ask the question, what are chemtrails? So if you type in that question on Google, here is what you will see. The chemtrail conspiracy theory is the erroneous belief that long-lasting condensation trails left in the sky by high-flying aircraft are actually chemtrails consisting of chemical or biological agents sprayed for nefarious purposes undisclosed to the general public. That is from Wikipedia. So immediately Big Tech tells you that chemtrails are a conspiracy theory. I admit it wasn't until the last few years that I've really started paying attention to and researching chemtrails more in depth. My wife was the one who really started drawing my attention to it. If you do any research on Google into chemtrails, you'll get links to websites such as BBC, Chemtrails, What's the Truth Behind the Conspiracy Theory, and on CNN, chemtrails are one of the most popular conspiracy theories. Here's what it means. Or the Royal Aeronautical Society, chemtrails debunked. Yes, you will find an entire list of links to websites talking about the chemtrails conspiracy theory. I'll save you some time from reading through them. Every single one you find on the first page of Google. I didn't keep going, but probably every page of Google search results will give you a never-ending list of websites and links to articles that will all tell you the same thing. Chemtrails are just a conspiracy theory and not a real thing. Most any mainstream media site or news outlet you will visit will tell you the same thing. Have you ever heard of geoengineering? Try Googling it, and the very top result, that I get at least, is from Politico in large font letters that reads, Geoengineering is happening. Solar geoengineering isn't just theoretical. Make Sunsets, a small startup climate company headquartered in South Dakota that sells cooling credits to launch weather balloons that aim to deposit small quantities of sulfur dioxide particles into the upper atmosphere. According to Andrew Song, one of the company's founders, each gram of SO2 offsets the warming from 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide released by the burning of fossil fuels. Song also claims that the 53-plus kilograms of sulfur dioxide Make Sunsets has released since February 2023 is equal to cooling equivalent of planting 2.5 million trees a year. The company has ignited controversy since its creation, with experts saying that our understanding of injecting particles in the atmosphere without knowing potential side effects is dangerous, and that they are doing these things outside of the scope of authority of government and without general approval of the public. For now, Make Sunsets continues to operate and sell their cooling credits for $10 for every gram of SO2. So what if I told you that chemtrails and geoengineering was basically the same thing? Or at least what we know as chemtrails is being sprayed under the guise of geoengineering. So another question, have you ever heard of HAARP? HAARP stands for the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. For those not familiar, it is an array of 180 radio antennas spread out over 33 acres outside Gakona, Alaska. According to HAARP's official website, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, or HAARP, is a scientific endeavor aimed at studying the properties and behavior of the ionosphere. The facility used to be operated by the U.S. Air Force, but operation of the array was transferred to the University of Alaska Fairbanks on August 11, 2015. Officially, HAARP is just used to study the atmosphere, but since its construction in 1993, scientists and conspiracy theorists have long questioned how it is truly used and what its capabilities truly are. Many have suggested that it can and has been used to alter and control the weather. What research I have done on HAARP, to me, is inconclusive. Before it was transferred over to the University of Alaska and was run by the federal government, it certainly seemed very odd to have such a large facility with such a massive array of radio towers, but since then the University of Alaska does an open house during the summer at which civilians can tour the facility. Note to the government, disclosure destroys doubt. But HAARP isn't the only facility that is large enough and powerful enough to manipulate the weather. In Tallahassee, Florida, near Florida State University, is a massive complex, 370,000 square feet to be exact, called the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory, known also as the Magnet Lab. This facility is the largest, most high-powered magnetic laboratory on Earth. At this facility, there is a 32 Tesla superconducting magnet, which is the most powerful in the world, and a 45 Tesla magnet that combines a 11.5 Tesla with a 33.5 Tesla resistive magnet. If that doesn't make sense to you, then that makes two of us. There is a popular theory going around right now, for those that have heard of the Mag Lab, that the facility was actually used to push Hurricane Helene away from Tallahassee. If you look at the actual track, it is hard to deny that Helene literally jumped right just before making landfall outside of Tallahassee. Earlier this year, Tallahassee was spared a direct hit from Hurricane Debbie. I'm not even going to try to understand the science here. If I could, I sure wouldn't be driving a truck for a living. These theories are fascinating, and if you look at the tracks and do the research, it is extremely coincidental. This brings the question, if there are these facilities operated by colleges, what kind of insanity could there be out there that's been built and used by the military and the government? Skeptics may say they would never be able to do that, but it would be seen by satellites and airplanes traveling over that airspace. But keep in mind that the government controls who can see what and has the authority to shut down Google Earth and restrict airspace anywhere in our country and its territories. Do you think you can just go onto Google Earth and look live into Area 51? Yeah, think again. Now, the government, and other foreign governments for that matter, would never try to intentionally alter the weather, right? Wrong. The government has been experimenting with it and, in fact, modifying the weather for a very long time. As early as 1947, the government launched Project Cirrus. Project Cirrus was a collaboration between the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Army Signal Corps, the Office of Naval Research, and General Electric. Vincent Schaefer, a General Electric researcher at the time, discovered that dry ice could cause supercooled water to freeze, which led to the idea that seeding clouds with dry ice could alter clouds and precipitation. On October 13, 1947, a B-17 dropped nearly 180 pounds of dry ice into Hurricane Cape Sable. The hurricane later changed direction and made landfall in Georgia. Following the hurricane, the project was canceled, and the public blamed the seeding for the hurricane, but evidence supposedly showed that the storm had already begun to turn when seeding began. Project Storm Fury was created from 1962 to 1983, and it was a government program that attempted to use silver iodide to cause the supercooled water in the storm to freeze and attempt to disrupt the inner structure of hurricanes. Supposedly, the project failed to reduce the strength of hurricanes. In 1967, the U.S. government initiated a project called Operation Popeye in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. The highly classified program attempted to extend the monsoon season over specific areas of the Ho Chi Minh Trail in order to disrupt North Vietnamese military supplies by softening road surfaces and causing landslides. The sitting U.S. Secretary of Defense at the time put out a memo stating that he was aware that there might be objections from the international scientific community, but stated in the memo that such objections had not in the past been a basis for prevention of military activities considered to be in the interest of U.S. national security. Famed journalist Seymour Hersh, you may have heard of him, most recently he was the one bringing attention to the Nord Stream pipeline cover-up, helped expose the program with an article published in the New York Times titled, "Rainmaking is Used as a Weapon by the U.S." So even in 1967, the U.S. government basically said, we don't care what you think. If it helps us accomplish our objectives, we're going to do it anyway. My quote, of course. So if they were doing this back then, imagine the technological advancements and things they can and are doing now. So let's talk about more recent weather events. Has anyone heard the theories about Hurricane Katrina? I'm sure everyone remembers Katrina, the devastating Category 5 hurricane that hit Louisiana and killed over 1,300 people in August 2005. Hurricane Katrina started out as a very interesting tropical depression and surprisingly intensified into a hurricane a mere 2 hours before making landfall at Hallandale Beach in Florida on August 25th. It then entered the Gulf of Mexico after very briefly weakening into a tropical storm as it passed over Florida before increasing incredibly fast into a Category 5 hurricane. I want to say it was a 3 when it made landfall, but I'd have to check that. Some will, of course, say it entered the warm waters over the Gulf, but the rate at which it increased was very surprising even to meteorologists and weather experts. It has been suggested that Katrina was somehow created and manipulated by either the U.S. government or another foreign power as a weapon. Imagine the destruction that could be unleashed if countries could create hurricanes, tsunamis, and tornadoes and target them with surgical precision towards any of their adversaries. Of course, there's no definitive proof of any of this, but it definitely makes you think about it and imagine the possibilities. I mentioned in one of my previous shows that I would be discussing Hurricane Helene that recently devastated Florida, Georgia, East Tennessee, and especially western North Carolina. Man, the things that I have been hearing via social media the past 2 weeks has been incredibly disturbing. There are hundreds of reports of government agencies such as FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and TEMA, Tennessee Emergency Management Agency, not only blocking the intake and distribution of crucial supplies such as food, water, and generators, but actually seizing and redistributing them. Just last week, a report came out from a SpaceX engineer on the ground helping distribute Starlink units, which are devices that help restore temporary communication, in which he claimed, I'm reading this from Elon Musk's X post directly from the engineer, FEMA was actively blocking shipments and seizing goods and services locally and blocking them away to state that they are their own. It's very real and scary how much they have taken control to stop people helping. We are blocked now on the shipments of new Starlink coming in until we get an escort from the fire department, but that may not be enough. Another ex-post from Spencer Smith detailed his conversation with a pastor who was working in, quote, one of the most devastated locations. During the conversation, he detailed many things, including that almost all help was being done by private citizens, private helicopters were flying in the vast majority of supplies, and FEMA's involvement has seriously complicated the rescue efforts. Then that local sheriffs have threatened to arrest FEMA workers if they hinder rescue and aid work. Another report and videos emerged this week on TikTok and X, apparently showing a military Black Hawk helicopter flying in over a hurricane relief site in Burnsville, North Carolina on Sunday, performing a rotor wash maneuver that used the very powerful gusts coming from the helicopter blades to blow away supplies and destroy canopy tents that had been set up. People working at the relief site claimed it had been established as a no-fly zone and that the helicopter pilots wore masks. Also reportedly, before the helicopter arrived, 2 unmarked black SUVs came in unannounced with blue lights on and circled around and left. Reports this week also claim that FEMA helicopters have blocked the Greenville, South Carolina airport and have taken over a hangar there as well. I could go on and on about these reports and stories that I've heard. I will go on the record and say I am not there. I do not know firsthand how bad the damage and destruction is. But from what I've seen, it is much worse than what has been reported in the media, especially the death toll. It is not my goal or desire to spread any kind of so-called disinformation, but these reports are too widespread to all be false. If you've listened to my show before, you have heard me say that I am an eternal believer in the saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. So I'll leave you with that concerning the truth about the recovery efforts for Helene. Now, to address another theory about Helene, did the government somehow create or manipulate Helene itself? I saw a very compelling video of a time-lapse over the course of Helene's path as it made its way into the continental U.S. There are dozens and dozens of small blips, for lack of a better term, that look like little explosions. Almost all of them are to the west of Helene. You can see the circulation of the storm as it makes landfall, and then all these blips occur once it makes landfall. It's been suggested, and again, I'm just having a discussion here, not stating facts, that these are either NEXRAD, which is Next Generation Weather Radar systems. Conspiracy theorists have suggested that these NEXRAD radio stations can not only track the weather, but also have the power to somehow alter it as well. Of course, everyone has heard the theories surrounding 5G cell phone towers. I can tell you I'm no meteorologist, but what I saw was weird and totally looked like what I would imagine if a radar screen looking like if someone was trying to alter or even steer a storm towards a certain path. It's been theorized that Helene was deliberately altered to do the most damage in these areas. The reasons possibly being, number one, apart from Asheville, North Carolina, which is a predominantly Democratic city, almost all of the hard-hit areas are in deep red conservative areas, and this was done purposely to try to keep Republican voters trapped and from making it to the polls on Election Day. And number two, that there is a huge deposit of lithium under some of the hardest-hit areas. One thing is for sure, if indeed our government is somehow weaponizing hurricanes and any form of weather for that matter, they are breaking international law. How is that, you might ask? Well, in 1977, the U.S. government signed a United Nations treaty barring the use of weather modification, specifically weather weapon technology. The UN treaty was called NMOD, or the Convention on the Prohibition of Military or Any Other Hostile Use of Environmental Modification Techniques. The treaty was signed by the U.S. and 93 other nations, and the stated goal was to prevent any manipulation of the natural environment for hostile purposes, including techniques that could have widespread, long-lasting, or severe effects on the environment. Article 1 says, states will not undertake or engage in military or any other hostile use of environmental modification techniques that would cause such effects. Article 2 defines environmental modification techniques as changing the dynamics, composition, or structure of the Earth, including its biota, lithosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere, or outer space. I am personally 100% convinced that the government is and has been manipulating the weather for quite some time. I live in the great state of Tennessee, and very recently, July 1st of this year, Tennessee lawmakers passed a bill banning the release of airborne chemicals into the air. The bill forbids intentional injection, release, or dispersion of chemicals into the air and prohibits affecting temperature, weather, or the intensity of the sunlight. Still think that chemtrails aren't a real thing. While I love the initiative taken by Tennessee lawmakers, here's the problem with that. While it sounds great on paper, governors, state representatives, and state and local governments in general have absolutely zero control over airspace. Zero. The only thing they actually control is airports and landing zones. And truthfully, they don't control those. While they can shut down and regulate airports and landing zones in their respective states and areas, they may face several consequences from the federal government for doing so. On top of that, ask yourself this question. Does a state governor or government have fighter jets, air defenses, or attack helicopters? If you answered no, then you're correct. So even if state government had any real authority over any airspace, how would they enforce it? That's pretty much like posting a speed limit sign on a highway and telling people they can't speed without having state troopers or any cops of any kind to actually ticket people and enforce the speed limit. That's pretty much the situation we are in Tennessee. Governor Bill Lee can file complaints with the FAA and the federal government, but beyond doing some bickering and complaining, there really isn't anything he nor any of Tennessee's government can actually do about it. Until legislation is actually passed at a federal level and enforced, remember that's a very important part. The government and whatever private companies they will hire will continue to spray chemtrails and perform weather modification, and there isn't anything we can do about it. So what exactly are they spraying? Mainstream media and the government want you to believe that chemtrails aren't real and that everything that you see in the sky is simply contrails or condensation trails from behind aircraft that are produced by engine exhaust or changes in air pressure that are composed primarily of water in the form of ice crystals. The mainstream media, big tech, and the government will tell you that differences in altitude and humidity is the reason why some planes leave contrails and some don't, and why some are so much larger than others and last much longer. Well, if you buy this story, great. I'll be the first to admit I am no scientist, but I can literally look up in the sky and see two different planes that aren't all that far away from each other, producing incredibly different size and intensity of contrails. I'm going to call them contrails for the moment, since I don't in fact believe that every jet plane sprays chemtrails. But come on, people, does anyone actually see these massive grid patterns in the sky that are left behind oftentimes for hours and believe that this is just vapor trails from commercial aircraft? I certainly don't. There has been atmospheric testing that has proven and detected high levels of sulfur dioxide, as well as heavy metals such as aluminum and barium. These substances are not native to Earth's atmosphere, people, and we don't even want to talk about the health effects that are related to exposure of sulfur, including neurological and behavioral changes, heart damage, reproductive failure, and damage to lung and kidney function, just to name a few. So this begs the question, how are they spraying these chemicals into the air? Is it military planes? Is it private aircraft hired covertly as contractors for the military or some other shadow organization? Is it commercial aircraft that are either willingly doing it or doing it without any knowledge whatsoever of what they're doing? From all my research into this subject, this seems to be the trickiest question to get concrete intel on. There are many documented, photographed, and videoed accounts of specially modified aircraft used to carry out cloud seeding flights. The funny thing is, if you do a search for cloud seeding, you will find a plethora of information on the subject in which they openly admit to spraying silver iodide and potassium iodide using a multitude of different aircraft such as fixed-wing Piper Senecas, Tecnam P-2006Ts, or turboprop aircraft such as Cessna Caravans or Beechcraft King Airs. But I'm reasonably certain that these are government aircraft that are covertly spraying chemicals into the atmosphere as well. I have personally seen black or gray aircraft that appear to be much larger than the aforementioned aircraft in the skies, leaving behind extremely large and long-lasting contrails. There is also the popular theory that commercial aircraft are literally always spraying chemicals into the air from additives that are covertly added to jet fuel, to which major airlines and airline pilots would probably have no knowledge of without doing routine testing of the jet fuel they're actually using. Being that jet fuel is highly regulated and refined, And I highly doubt that any major airline rarely, if ever, tests the jet fuel they are using. So we've been discussing this in depth, but still you say this is all speculative at best. Other than reports about Operation Popeye in the 1960s, is there really any definitive proof of any of this? Well, obviously I'm not a scientist, so I can't break out a bunch of scientific equipment to go and randomly test the air after I see chemtrails in the sky. But I can point you to a recent event that a foreign government purposely and successfully altered the weather on a specific date and time. That country was China, and the event was the Chinese Communist Party's centennial celebration in Beijing. They literally changed the weather and created clear skies. Of course, the CCP will never blatantly admit this, but journalists all over China reported seeing rockets being launched and rocket debris all over the area right before the celebration. It is my personal opinion that China has indeed surpassed the U.S. in a lot of military technology, and I do believe both countries currently have the technology and means to control the weather to a certain extent. Again, imagine the ramifications of having the power to literally change the weather anywhere in the world and the tactical advantage that would give a major power such as China, were we ever to go to war with them. And while we're in the subject of war and the power this kind of technology could hold, be sure to look up good old Bill Gates and his role in the current and future applications of weather modification. I could probably do an entire show discussing his plans and funding of weather modification programs. I have an upcoming show about globalists and the people who run the world and truly call the shots. I will be discussing Mr. Gates quite a bit in the future. I know this is a lot, and there's still a lot of people that think I might just be a crazy conspiracy theorist, but I've tried to provide you with real definitive proof that something is going on. I think most anyone with an open mind and some common sense could do a little research on the matter themselves and come to the same conclusions as I do. This sucks too, because the truth is there isn't a thing we can do about it. The government and wealthy, powerful globalists such as Bill Gates have the power, the means, and the money to spray chemicals in our atmosphere basically whenever they want. All we can do is make sure we take care of our bodies and our immune systems. There are a bunch of holistic companies that sell heavy metal detox supplements that help your immune system fight off exposure to high levels of heavy metals. It's funny because me and my friends have commented multiple times on days that we have seen heavy chemtrails in the sky, and how the days and weeks after we see lots of spraying, how everyone in our community seems to all of a sudden get sick. Coincidence? We sure don't think so. But of course, I'm not a scientist, so I can't definitively prove it. But I think it's important that we're aware of it, and I hope that one day it becomes an important issue and no longer a conspiracy theory. Maybe then our elected officials will take action and hold the government and whoever else is responsible accountable. That's my show for this week. I appreciate you listening as always. Remember to like and follow us on Facebook, X, and Truth Social. And you can always email the show at thepppodcast@yahoo.com. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast. Your source for real news and analysis on politics, prepping, paranormal, conspiracy theories, and the volatile state of the world we live in. Tune in next week and every week for a new episode, and stay safe, stay healthy, and stay vigilant.